At age 15, I sold my life to a kingdom that lives under the ocean. And part of me never fully came back. OJ, listen to me carefully because what I'm about to tell you is not a story I made up to frighten you. It is something I've lived through with my own body. I want to give you my name, OJ, and I'd rather you not guess at one either. Because my name is exactly the kind of thing that finds its way back to a person. I grew up in Kumasi, in a house with 4 walls and no peace inside of them. Because peace was something my family had stopped believing in. My father drank every single night, OJ, and my mother absorbed his anger like a wall absorbs rain, quietly, without complaint, without ever once thinking of leaving him for her own sake. I was a quiet child in the house, OJ, the one who sat in corners and said very little because talking too much in that home only invited more shouting from my father's side of the room. By the time I turned 15, my grades were falling apart, OJ, because how can a child concentrate on mathematics when her own parents are at war every single evening in the next room? Our neighbors in Kumasi could hear the shouting through the walls some nights, and in the mornings they would greet my mother as though nothing at all had happened. I stopped bringing friends home early because I was ashamed of what they would hear. So by the time I turned 15, I had learned to keep almost everything at arm's length. There was a girl in my school. Her name we shall call my friend. And she noticed that I was drowning long before I ever said a single word about it to her. My friend invited me to a church one Friday, and I agreed immediately because anything that promised to take away from my father's voice sounded like heaven to me. I want you to understand something. My family never prayed. We never opened the Bible. So when my friend spoke about the church, I had no instinct telling me to be careful. She told me we will meet at the beach near Elmina, and the details alone should have frightened me, but it did not, because I was young and desperate for anywhere but home. My friend explained that her church sat beneath the ocean itself, and even that confession did not shake anything in me, because a child running from chaos will follow almost anyone who smiles at her. We were to wait until darkness fell before our transport arrived. So my friend bought us kele willing and roasted fish from a woman near the shore while the sun slowly disappeared behind the waters. All I wanted that evening, OJ, was distance from my family, from my father shouting in my mother's silence. And my friend's world promised me exactly that kind of distance, wrapped in kindness I had never known. When the sun finally set, my friend told me to sit still on the sun, close my eyes, and imagine that I was about to enjoy the best ride of my entire life. She warned me not to be afraid of whatever I saw next. OJ, I understood her warning completely the moment a massive serpent rose silently out of the dark water before us. My whole body wanted to run, but my friend held my hand firmly and told me to remain still, that everything happening was going to be perfectly fine for both of us. The serpent opened along its side like a door, and my friend led me straight into its body, and then it carried the two of us down into the ocean itself. We sank deeper and deeper, past the point where sunlight could even reach, until we arrived at what looked like an entire kingdom built quietly beneath the sea. I know how insane it sounds, OJ, but there are people living down here, an entire civilization hidden beneath the waves that most Ghanaians will never know exists. The moment we stepped out, it felt as though everyone already knew my name, greeting me warmly, as though I had been expected there for my whole life without ever knowing it. Among the crowd, there was a man, striking handsome, and the instant our eyes met, something inside me shifted in a way I still cannot fully explain to you today. Everyone kept repeating that they loved me, OJ. And for the first time in 15 years, I actually believed I was wanted somewhere by someone without any conditions attached to it. I forgot my mother and father completely in that moment because this new place, however impossible it sounds, felt more like family than my own blood had ever. They called it the greatest church in existence and told me a meeting was coming, one that would introduce us to the woman who ruled over our region from the surface world. After the meeting, my friend led me on a tour, and I saw creatures down there that I still have no words to properly describe to you even now. There was music playing somewhere in the walls of the place. Okay, no instruments that I could see anywhere, just sound pressing in from every direction at once, calm and hypnotic. I remember other young people on the tour too, teenagers like myself, some of them looking as dazed and graceful as I felt, holding hands with whoever had brought them there. None of us asked each other questions. It did not even occur to me to wonder how another schoolgirl from Chakradi or Cape Coast had ended up standing beside me in that same hallway. There was a massive screen, flat, yet somehow wrapped around the entire space, transparent, rotating to follow whatever person on land they were monitoring at that exact moment. People are watching every single hour of the day, especially the ones already doing the kingdom's work up on the surface, tracked like cattle through that impossible glass. I was shown a place where clothing gets designed, OJ, garments they promised the whole world would soon be chasing after, obsessed with owning, without ever questioning where the design originated. They spoke openly about certain garments, engineered deliberately to put people's mind towards sin, towards pleasure, towards anything that pulled them further away from God's instruction. The year down there felt frozen somewhere in the early 2000s, and the mission, stated plainly, was to drag as many souls as possible away from salvation. Disease was named as one of their weapons, OJ, spread deliberately to multiple sins across the earth, ensuring that fewer people remain standing beside Christ when the final trumpet sounded. One of the girls I met there disappeared from her own school no longer after, and to this day, I do not know whether she went home or whether she simply stayed down there. I think about her sometimes, OJ, a girl whose real name I'd never even learned, because down there we were taught quickly that names belong to a life we were leaving behind. Before we left that kingdom, my friend slipped a small ring onto my finger, and the moment it settled there, my spiritual sight went completely dark. Everything wrong happening around me stopped looking wrong, OJ. The ring had blinded my discernment entirely, and I walked towards believing every lie without a single flicker of doubt. We traveled next to an old woman's house near Anomabo, and inside her room sat a large clay pot releasing thick steam with a smell I still remember till today. She instructed me to lower my face into the steam, performing a ritual over me while I knelt there, powerless to question anything she was doing to my body. When it ended, OJ, she handed me a mirror, and I looked into it expecting my own reflection. But instead, my face was slowly becoming her face. Something spiritual had transferred into me that night. And from that moment forward, OJ, this woman became the one assigning missions to me and to others under her command. Her authority in that kingdom was untouchable, and only through relentless, uncomplaining service to the darkness she represented, a devotion that had cost her everything human inside of her. Looking into her eyes felt like staring directly into evil itself. And from that point, my spirit learned to separate itself from my sleeping body at night. My body stayed home in Kumasi while my spirit went to work, causing accidents, breaking marriages, and disturbing church services where the true gospel still had power. Let me explain how marriage were destroyed. OJ, because the devil despises anything holy, and marriage, blessed by God, sits high on his list of targets. My first assignment was a marriage, and we could always identify the couple that mattered, because a ring blessed by a genuine pastor carries a faint light around it. Unmarried people wearing rings meant nothing to us. OJ, we ignored them completely because our targets were always the children of God wearing rings soaked in real prayers. I was sent to study one family for weeks, invisible patience, learning their habits the way a hunter studies a path before ever setting a single trap. Every human being carries a weakness somewhere, and our entire assignment was locating that exact weakness, then striking it the way a cobra strikes, quick and without warning. In this family's case, the husband's weakness was clear. He spent his nights watching women dance in his phone screen, and that crack became our doorway inside. I was also sent on assignments along the Kumasi to Accra highway, standing where drivers could not see me, waiting for the exact second a tired man's eye began to close. A road accident is never really an accident, OJ. Not always. Sometimes it is a spirit standing in the dark shoulders of the road, timing a driver's fatigue, like a conductor timing an orchestra. I was told these accidents served two purposes: fear spreading through families left behind, and grief that could be twisted later into anger against God for allowing it to happen. I do not know how many families were touched by what I did on that road, because we were never shown the aftermath, only given the next assignment immediately afterwards. That silence, OJ, not knowing what became of the people, was somehow worse than watching what would have been, because my mind filled in the endings on its own, over and over. I must also tell you about the churches, because many pastors standing at the pulpit today are not standing there for God, no matter how loudly they preached. We tested churches for weakness the same way we tested marriages, and far too many of them failed that test. Hollow underneath, they are singing and they are shouting. The devil understands something about believers, that many of us love worship but rarely opens your Bibles. And that gap is exactly where confusion slips inside. This is why you now see people dancing to worldly music inside church buildings, bodies moving to rhythms that have nothing to do with the Holy Spirit at all. Some prophets you trust are paid directly by the kingdom I serve, and many churches now sell anointing oils and wristbands with origin nobody bothers to question. Be careful with unfamiliar oil, OJ. Some are blessed by demons beneath the same ocean. Each demon carrying a name, and that name attach itself to you the moment you use it. You were sent into services where God's presence was genuinely strong, carrying nothing but confusion to pour over the congregation like smoke filling a small room. Children would suddenly start crying during sermons, noise erupting from nowhere, and a disruption was our work, pulling attention away from the preacher's message at the exact wrong moment. There was one pastor in Ejiso, a young man who prayed with a fire I could feel from outside the church gate, and we were sent there 3 separate times without success. Each time we failed, the superior grew angrier, insisting we return and try again, until eventually a different, weaker congregation nearby became the easier, softer target instead. I still wonder about the pastor in Jesus sometimes, OJ, whether he ever knew how many times his church was surrounded by something his own eyes could not see. I was given a number instead of a name, OJ. Letters and digits that identified me in that spiritual system, because names apparently held too much power to be trusted there. While my spirit worked at night, my body caused chaos during the day, and I eventually dropped out of school entirely, becoming someone my own family no longer recognized. I was promised an audience with the ruler himself once I climbed high enough in rank. A promise dangled in front of me like fruit just out of reach. One assignment sent me towards a pastor's household, and as I approached, I saw the entire compound wrapped in something like a wall of fire I could not cross. A man in a white stood guarding the house, OJ, holding a sword, and though the kingdom edged me forward, calling him a liar, I already sensed I would not survive that attempt. I could not refuse the order. My allegiance had already been sworn, so I pressed forward anyway, and that sword struck me down before I reached the gate. That happened in a spiritual realm, but the pain followed me back into my body, and early the next morning, I woke up exhausted on my own bed in Kumasi. There is a mark on my side even now, one my mother once asked me about, and I told her I had fallen against a table because what else could I have told her? Doctors have never been able to explain that mark. It does not look like a scar from an object in this world, and it aches sometimes when I am afraid. By nightfall, I was pulled back into the same spiritual world, because the kingdom shows no mercy to servants who failed, wounded or not, rested or not. We were told constantly that time was running short, OJ, that Christ's return was near, and that urgency alone was used to push us harder towards our targets. I was promised money that never once arrived, because everything that kingdom offers is built on lies, stacked on top of older, more convincing lies. I remember demanding my promised reward from a superior, and instead, he brought me a glass filled with tears, calling them tears that had fallen from the ruler's own face. He told me those tears proved how badly the kingdom wanted me to remain there forever. A strange offering that felt more like a threat than any comfort. I am grown now, OJ, and I still live in Kumasi, close enough to the same house where all of this started, and my parents still do not know what happened to their daughter. I have never told my mother of this, because I do not know which would frighten her more, the story itself, or the fact that some of it might still be true. I keep my distance from churches now, not because I stopped believing, but because I am genuinely unsure what I still carry inside of me, and I do not want to disrupt anyone else's worship. My friend and I do not speak anymore. She moved away from Kumasi years ago, and part of me is relieved, while another part of me still misses the girl who first held my hand. Sometimes I see girls her age laughing together near the trotro station, and I wonder how many of them have already been noticed, already been chosen, without knowing it yet. OJ, I still wear that ring some nights when the house is quiet and nobody is watching me, and I could not fully explain to you why my hand still reaches for it. I do not know how to end this for you, OJ, because I am not sure it has ended for me. Some assignments I was given, I never found out if I completed them. There is a number that still comes to me in my sleep. Letters and digits I was told were mine. And some nights I still answer to it before I remember I am not supposed to. I have thought about going back to that beach near Elmina, just to stand there in daylight and see whether it looks as ordinary as every other stretch of sand along the coast. I have never actually gone because some part of me is afraid of what might still be waiting there for me. Patience, the way the kingdom always seemed to be. I do not tell this confession looking for pity, OJ. I tell it because somewhere out there is another 15-year-old sitting exactly where I once sat, desperate enough to follow anyone who smiles. I still cannot watch the tide come in without my chest tightening. Even here in Kumasi, far from the coast, the sound of water on a television is sometimes enough. Some of you already know pieces of a story like mine, OJ. And if that is you, I am asking you gently to speak to it in the comments below, because I'd rather sit with your discomfort than watch you walk toward the same shoreline blind. This is your anonymous OJ, and if you are new here, I'd like you to like, subscribe, share, comment, and hype this channel, and tell somebody about your anonymous OJ. I'll see you in our next conversion.